Hello, everybody. We are allowing people to join and we'll get started in just a moment. Thank you for coming. Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jana Weiss. I'm the Student Life Coordinator for Global Online, and welcome to Recipes for Success. Today, we are going to talk about learn how to learn and developing learning strategies. And we have two wonderful guests with us. We have Amanda Guerrero, the Director of Instructional Support, and Juanita Martinez, the Learning Center Manager for Tutoring. Welcome, Amanda and Juanita.
Thank you. Let's see here. All right. As Jenna mentioned, my name is Amanda Guerrero. I'm the Director for Instructional Support. I oversee our real-time, face-to-face, and video conference tutoring options here at Houston Community College. The topic that we're going to be talking about today is how you develop your learning strategies. It's just a simpler way of saying that we're going to be talking about metacognition. And most of the content that we're going to be covering today comes from this reference book. It's called Teach Yourself How to Learn Strategies That You Can Use to Ace Any Course at Any Level by Sandra Yancey McGuire. So we wouldn't be responsible scholars if we didn't give credit where credit is due. And so if you would like more information on the topics that we're discussing today, you're welcome to check out this book at one of our libraries and see how it works for you. Let's go to the next slide. So Juanita, I'll take this one and then we can alternate. Is that cool?
That sounds great.
Okay, so today our topic is metacognition. And you might ask, it's a long word. What exactly does metacognition mean? Well, it's the use of self-reflecting awareness and adjustments to behaviors that support goal-directed processes. Basically, it's the ability to think about how your own thinking occurs, to be consciously aware of yourself as a problem solver, for your ability to plan, monitor, evaluate, and to control your mental processing. For example, when you're studying, you can ask yourself questions like, am I really understanding this material or am I just memorizing it? It's your ability to accurately judge what your level of learning is. Basically, you would know what you know, and then you would know what you don't know, and that helps you come up with a better plan on what you need to focus your attention on when it comes to studying.
Okay, so how would you answer this? What did most of your two teachers in high school do the day before the test? What did they do during this activity? What grade would you have made on this test if you had gone to class only on the day before the test? Will you succeed in your college level courses using this strategy? So something to think about, how you performed while you were in high school or at any time, and now to how you're performing today.
So this is just an example. This isn't a guarantee that this is what's going to happen with each and every individual here, but in the book it talks about this student who is a first-year calculus student. And prior to understanding metacognition and what their specific learning styles were, this student was making grades like 79 and 54 on their tests. They were memorizing the formulas, they were using their online homework problems, but after understanding the concepts of metacognition and how to apply it, it's one thing, you can sit in this call or this conference call and you can listen to everything that we have to say, but if you leave this call and you don't try to implement any sort of strategies, well, it was just an hour of time that you just spent listening to content. So it's not just understanding what metacognition is, it's about putting it then into practice, right? So as we go through this call, I challenge you to make notes about practical action steps that you might be able to take when you leave this conference, and that you yourself can actually implement, and then make a concerted effort for the next 21 days to implement those strategies. And then obviously things, if you need to switch things up because you need to tweak something, then you know that that's okay to do as well. But after metacognition, this student started making 90s, 95s on their exams. So there's a lot of research out there that shows that students who implement these strategies tend to have higher success rates and grades after understanding and implementing metacognitive strategies. So you might ask yourself, well, what specific strategies did this student use to become a better student? We're going to talk about some of that stuff.
Effective homework strategies. So here's one strategy that all students probably experience. So when you are working on your homework, you're going to study the material first, and that's before looking at problems and questions. And you're going to use your textbook or class notes for this. You're going to work example problems without looking at the solutions until you get the answer. Then you're going to check to see if you're getting the correct answer. If your answer is not coming out correctly, you have to try to figure out, where are you making the mistake? Where am I getting stuck at? So possibly you could ask for help. So you could ask for your professor's help during his office hours. Now, your professor will list on his syllabus when he's available to speak with you outside of class during his office hours. So look at your syllabus. You may have to set up an appointment, or you could probably send him an email, whatever recommendation your professor provides. Or you may get involved with your peer study support groups. So get to know your classmates. Perhaps your other classmates are struggling just as much as you, and you can get together, and you can find someone that can help you in a group setting. You could also use supplemental instruction if it's available to your class. And also, you can attend tutoring. You can set up an appointment. One of our tutoring centers, we have 14 tutoring locations. You can call the number that we're going to present to you later on and schedule an appointment, or go in person at any of the locations to meet with a tutor for most of your subjects. Also, you're going to work homework problems and answer questions as if you're taking a test. So just think about that. While you're doing your homework, possibly some of those homework problems will have similarities to what's going to be on your test.
So why is using the textbook so important? We have a lot of classes, we have a lot of textbooks that we have responsibility for, and we hear and see some students that enter into their courses, they don't even purchase their textbooks. But let's talk a little bit about the importance of using your textbook. So what word might come to mind when you see C blank T? Well, would this particular word have come to your mind if we lived in a culture that had no cats? Or they didn't call them cats, they called them something else, and you'd never seen that word before. So our brains will automatically fill in missing information if we're familiar with the content. Other examples like TXT, MSGS, text messages, right? Does your brain have the information that it needs to fill in what's missing in your course notes if you don't have background content information from the textbook to do so? Do you think that your tests are going to be written from what your brain sees, or what your professor's brain sees? The professor's brain sees the content in the textbook, and that's what they're to be teaching their courses from, and that's what you're taking your course notes from as well. So it's very important to not just have your textbook, but we're going to talk about how you can use your textbook to go through the content more efficiently as well.
Okay, effective reading comprehension. So while you're reading those textbooks, you may want to apply this strategy. You're going to preview text before reading, or develop an anticipatory set of questions. You're going to read one paragraph at a time and paraphrase information, kind of like, put it into your own words. You're going to use the SQ 5R strategy, where you survey, and that involves reading the intro. You may want to take a look at the summary, any bold words or italicized words, and then question. Devise questions that you think the reading will answer. What did I learn from reading this paragraph? You're going to read one paragraph at a time. You're going to recite or summarize in your own words what you just read. And you're going to record or take some notes, and you can do that in the margins of your textbook or on a piece of paper. Take some notes about what you're reading. Then you're going to review or summarize the chapter of the information in your own words. Then you're going to reflect. You may you go back to class and ask some questions because you may have some questions about what you just read. Keep that in mind. Take that in, put that into your notes. And when you go back to class, you can ask the professor or possibly your study group, what did y'all think about this? Or what was I supposed to understand from this? Did you understand it?
All right, so when you're developing your metacognitive skills, you might ask, well, what's the difference between actually studying and learning? Studying is memorizing and focusing on the what the short-term learning items that might be forgotten, where learning is focused more on the hows, the whys, and the what ifs. So this promotes a better understanding of the material and applying what you learned. Learning leads to more learning because as you're learning material, you're asking yourself things and you're kind of digging into the details of it. Why do I need to know this? And then you might even have questions about the content, and that leads you down a different bit of rabbit hole where you're researching a little bit to find out a little bit more information about that particular topic. And then leaning also leads to your ability to say, can I turn around and teach this information to another person? And we're going to talk a little bit more about Bloom's taxonomy and how that fits into the bigger equation here. But we do have a testimony from one of the students who have actually worked on developing and implementing metacognitive skills, and they did so through the attendance of supplemental instruction sessions. So they attended their SI sessions and the exam reviews. Before the exam reviews and the SI sessions, they would try to answer as many of the questions as possible to see, where I was in terms of grasping the information. And then at the exam reviews and the SI sessions, I would know what I needed to understand. Next, after I reviewed the SI sessions, I would go into my room and I would teach the material to my beta fish. The material that I couldn't explain, I would study more. And I would continue with this cycle until I could explain everything in my notes. So this is a metacognitive strategy, taking what you've learned and trying to reteach it to something else or someone else.
So what do we know about learning? Active learning is more lasting than passive learning. So passive learning is an oxymoron. So it's, thinking about thinking is important, and that's metacognition. The level at which learning occurs is important. So we're going to go more into detail about Bloom's taxonomy on the next slide.
So Bloom's taxonomy, anybody who works in education, they're taught what Bloom's taxonomy is because as they're writing their lesson plans, they're keeping these in mind when they're creating assignments, and the goal is to get the students into a higher level of learning. So Bloom's taxonomy, we're going to start at the very foundational aspect of it. It's remembering. And you might ask yourself, can I recall the facts and the basic concepts? Remembering is defining, duplicating, listing, memorizing, repeating, and stating what the material or content is. The next level of a higher learning is understanding. So understanding is explaining ideas or concepts, being able to classify, describe, discuss, explain, identify, locate, reorganize information, report on it, select different things that would relate to it, and translate it. So once you've been able to remember and understand it, the next layer is applying it. Can I use the information in new situations? Execute, implement, solve, use, demonstrate, interpret, operate, schedule, or even sketch out. So you ever wonder why some of your professors might have you do multiple activities when it comes to new content? They're trying to get you. I used to love that when they would ask us to try to sketch out what we remember, right? They're asking you to apply the information basically. And then analyzing. So after you've been able to apply, can you analyze the information, draw conclusions amongst various ideas, differentiate, organize, relate, compare and contrast? Love those compare and contrast essays, right? Distinguish, examine, experiment, question, and then test your abilities. So you've remembered, you've understood, you've applied, you've analyzed, and now can you evaluate? Can you justify a stand or a decision? Can you argue or defend something that you might have analyzed or judge, or even select your support or critique it? And the last level of Bloom's taxonomy is the creation. Can you take everything that you've learned and produce something new? Whether that's designing or assembling or constructing or developing or being the author of or conduct a new investigation. Can you create something? So as you move up on these layers of Bloom's taxonomy, it solidifies your level of expertise of the content or the material that you're going over.
Okay, so we're going to ask the question, and students are more than welcome to put the answer in the chat. The first question is, at what level of Bloom's did you have to operate to make A's or B's in high school? So put that number in the chat. And let's see what kind of responses we got.
At a 3. Lots of 3s, 2 to 3.
Right. I do remember 1 through 3 when I was in high school. I applied all of those.
Somebody said 4, 2.
Okay. All right, next question. At what level of Bloom's do you think you'll need to operate to make A's in college? So go ahead and put your response in the chat again.
5, 4, still 3s and 2s, 5s, 1, at least a 4, a 5, lots of 5s and 4s, 3 to 4s, 5, 6.
Well, I would have to say throughout your college career, it might be all 6. Maybe not at the same time, but in a variety of ways for different courses, you're going to may have to apply all 6 or all 5. But yes, the higher the number, the more you're going to have to apply.
This is one of my favorite slides here. We're going to give credit to Louisiana State University's Academic Success Center for this one. This is a traditional study cycle, and we want to talk about that for a couple of minutes here. So you see in the bottom left-hand corner where it says start. So when you're starting a study cycle, the first thing you're going to want to do is preview and skim the new material, take notes on what the main ideas are to understand the big picture. You're going to do this before you even set foot in the classroom, right? You're provided your syllabus, and if you're not provided your syllabus before you take a course, all of your syllabi are accessible through something called Concourse through the HCC website. So you'll know week by week what it is that you have coming up before you even set foot in the classroom, and it's also usually posted in your Canvas shell. But then you'll attend class, take notes, ask questions based on that material. After class, and we recommend doing this semi-close after you finish the actual course, you'll review and read your notes and fill in the gaps. That's why it's important to do this close to when that class ends, because the longer that time that you wait between when the class ends and when you go back to review your notes, the harder it is to fill in the gaps in your notes. That's also, the review part is also something good that you could do with a study buddy or a study group, because sometimes your classmates might have gotten different aspects of the notes than what you had gotten, and so you guys can fill in your gaps together. And then there comes the study portion of it. A study session is typically about an hour, maybe an hour and a half in time. And this is what it would consist of. You're going to plan. So each time you sit down to study, it's good to have a specific goal in mind that you want to accomplish. And then you're going to take the next 30 to 50 minutes using effective study strategies like what we've been discussing to deeply engage with the material. It's a good idea to use concept maps and to read for comprehension or work problems and more. Remember to think critically by asking the whys, the hows, and the what ifs during that study session. It's important right after you have an in-depth study session to take a break, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Step away, clear your mind. It's a great idea to maybe just take a little walk around the block and then come back and spend about 5 minutes summarizing and wrapping up. And then you can choose, do I want to start another study session, or do I need to take a longer break, or do I need to change tasks or subjects, right? And that's what the study section would look like. And then after that, you're going to check and ask yourself, can I reteach this material? Have I mastered it, the information? And from there, you can decide, okay, do I need to restart the cycle? Am I ready to progress forward for the next week, or should I go back to the study step? And you can go back in between those. You can even go back to reviewing the notes, obviously, as well. And the presentations, if the professor posts them in Canvas, that's great too. So that's kind of what a typical study cycle would look like.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about time management and how to block out study time. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can consider where to start. You can start attending SI sessions if they're available. You can schedule tutoring appointments for your courses, or you could use the formula below. And the rough idea of how to set this up would be based on for each class. So and the level of difficulty. So 1 being low, 2 moderate, and 3 difficult. So let's take a look at that formula. Not too hard to follow, but for instance, if you take one class and it's a 3-hour credit class, and you consider it to be a moderate level, you would multiply that with a 3 credit hour. So therefore, you need to have at least 6 hours a week to study for this class. So as the class goes on, you may have to adjust the amount of time you're studying based on what's required for the class, whether it be a test or a big project. But also you have to include other things that's going on in your life. You have other classes, you may work, you may have a family, you have children, you have personal events in your life like church, or, you have to go to the doctor's appointments. So, always plan that out every week about how you're going to apply yourself for each course based on the level of difficulty per week until the semester is over. But you may have to adjust it, especially for midterms and finals.
So we're going to get a little bit into mindset. So mindset about how you think about your own intelligence, right? There are two different kinds of mindsets that we refer to. There's a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. When we're referring to a fixed mindset, a person might think that intelligence is static, that you have a certain amount of it. You're born with a certain amount of it. An example of a fixed mindset would be like when you say to yourself personally, I'm not good at chemistry, and at this point, my grade for that class is reflecting exactly that. And when you're having a growth mindset, that's kind of the polar opposite. It's intelligence can be developed. That's how you think about intelligence, and that you can grow it with actions and discipline. And examples would be, I ended up earning a 90 in the course, but I started with the 60. I think what I did different was I made the side in each chapter. And as I progressed into the next chapter, I was able to refer to those notes. I would say that in chemistry, everything builds from the previous topic. So how you go into each day, each week, each course about where your mindset is at, it's really good to check yourself. You'll have a much easier time, a much smoother time if when you get yourself into this fixed mindset, you change how you think about whatever it is that you're thinking at that moment to get it into a growth area.
Okay, so this next pictograph is just to kind of go over the same thing about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. We're going to take a look first at the fixed mindset. This is where intelligence is static. It leads to a desire to look smart and therefore a tendency to avoid challenges, give up easily on obstacles, see effort as fruitless or worse, ignore useful negative feedback, and feel threatened by the success of others. So as a result, you may not achieve what you want, your full potential. But if you were to take a look at the right-hand side of the growth mindset chart, intelligence can be developed. You have to put it into that mindset. It can be developed. It leads to a desire to learn, and therefore a tendency to embrace challenges, to persist in the face of obstacles or setbacks. You see any effort as a path to mastery, and you learn from constructive criticism. You don't take it personal. And you find lessons and inspirations in the success of others. This is where you would, your classmate did very well on a test, you wouldn't feel threatened by it. You would just say, "Hey, how did you do that? Did you understand the formula? Or did you understand what the professor was saying? Because I didn't exactly do well in that part of the test. What did I miss?" So ask questions and don't take it, personal or negative. But as a result, eventually you're going to find success in your coursework when you start practicing a growth mindset.
So let's talk about the key takeaways. As we've gone through the content of this workshop, we talked about effective homework strategies, always solving problems without looking at examples or solutions. We talked about some effective reading comprehension skills. Memorize what you're told to memorize, and then ask yourself, what am I supposed to know after reading each chapter? I love the five, was it the five Q5R
SQ.
strategy,
Yes,
SQ5R
SQ.
strategy?
Yeah.
That's a good strategy to use when you're using effective reading comprehension skills. And then developing your metacognitive learning strategies. Can you summarize or teach what you've learned? Understanding what Bloom's taxonomy is and know how to apply the higher order thinking skills as you're studying. Use the study cycle. Spend time working on your subjects every day. Time manage. Get yourself a manual planner. If you know me, I always have a manual one. It does align with my electronic one, but I need that manual one so I can carry it around. And I know we all have phones, and maybe that works better for you, but you'll find what works for you, and what might work for me may not work for you. So, but get your time management plan going. Make sure that you're doing your study cycles, I would say pretty consistently, daily, if you can. And then check yourself where your mindset is at, and then figure out what you can do, because it's totally normal to go in between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, and there might be different topics that you'll flip back and forth on this. Understand that it's not a bad thing if you have a fixed mindset. It just means that you've got to reframe what you're thinking to get yourself in a better place to make life a bit easier for you as you approach your studies. Okay. So we talked about at the very beginning that we could go through this entire workshop and you can listen, but if you didn't actually have anything to take away or anything that you would use action item wise, it's useless to just listen, right? So I want you to take a good look at these and see what you can develop as an action plan as you progress forward for the rest of the semester. You're still so early on in the semester. This is a great time to start implementing some of these strategies, and hopefully, just like some of the examples we provided, you'll find this to be a game changer.
Okay, fail or not to fail. So here are on the left, top 5 reasons to fail. You didn't spend enough time on the material. You started your homework late. You didn't exactly memorize the information. You probably skipped using the book, and you assumed to know material but did not apply what was learned. Top 5 ways to avoid failing is to do a preview review of every class or what you're reading. Um, do the homework a little at a time. You could use that time management, the block study time. Use the book and use suggested problems. So if you have a very thick textbook or if you're using an ebook, be sure to use all of the tools in that ebook where you can take notes or highlight or whatever is helpful in that publisher's textbook. Make flashcards for memorizing information. Practice explaining the information to others. This is where you use metacognition, where can you teach the material to somebody else? So are you committed to your own success? I hope so.
So, just in addition to tutoring, Juanita and I oversee our tutoring program, and I put the number in the chat, and Jana also posted our generic flyer there. Those are great resources to have. In fact, if you could, I would advise for you to take your cell phones out, call the number real quick, and then hang up, and then save it to your contacts. And just label it tutoring. But we also offer it at HCC counseling services. You can go and search for it in the search option, and we have personal counseling, ADA counseling, crisis counseling, and then also student success and retention counseling.
Okay, so this is the flyer that Amanda was talking about, and it's also in the chat. The flyer explains that you could have a virtual tutoring session or an on-campus tutoring session that's face-to-face. We have the web address on this flyer as well as the phone number. 713-718-8184 is the tutoring call center number where you can ask about tutoring or to schedule an appointment, or to find out a little bit more about your scheduled appointment if there's anything wrong during that session. But you also, if I want to take a look right here, if you want to take a look at the schedule of all tutoring, this is the web address right here. So this gets updated daily. There's no reason to print it out. You're just going to have to go to that web address and take a look to see where tutoring is available on campus and what subjects are available. I would recommend that if you're you need help in science subjects, that you may want to consider virtual. We don't have as many science tutors, but we have plenty of math students or math tutors that can help with the math concepts. So does anybody have any questions about tutoring in general? Now, tutoring sessions are 1 hour, 30 minutes to 1 hour per session, per subject per day. And I'm trying to think of the other questions I get asked. Do you have any questions on the chat? Just want to make sure I get a chance to allow someone to type in the chat if they need to.
Swoop.
Well, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I wish you the best of luck in your courses for this semester. So if you do have any questions for tutoring, you're more than welcome to visit our centers or to call the tutoring call center number. Thank you.
Hold on a minute. We do have another question. How should you juggle reviewing concepts from multiple different chapters and learning new concepts from other chapters at the same time?
I think taking notes and organizing your notes is the best way.
No, we don't upload the PowerPoint.edu. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Juanita, for coming today. Y'all have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.